Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope that you are all good. In today's video we are going to be doing a coloured acrylic ombre, and of course it's got to have an autumn theme. I'm working on my Glamorous practice hand, so I have just buffed over these tips. So these are going to kind of like be our clear base, and then we're going to do our acrylic ombre on top. Now for my coloured acrylic I have gone for the gorgeous copper penny. This is kind of like a bronzy brown and it has the most beautiful shimmer. Now I have left doing all of the steps on the first nail in real time, so you can kind of see a little bit easier how I work with the acrylic. Now with this particular bead I did pick it up a little bit on the dry side, and then it did start to polymerize when I was showing you guys the bead, so I'm having to work with it a little bit more than normal just to get it to blend back. Now something I really love about this particular colored acrylic is where it has that shimmer in it, it makes it really easy to blend. So if you are new to doing colored acrylic ombres or any kind of ombre really, if you pick colors with a shimmer or glitter in them, you will find that they blend out a little bit easier. Now with colored acrylic you will get a lot of the pigmentation, especially if you're using quite highly pigmented colors like these darker shades, you will get some of that color sticking in your brush. So it's really important that you keep your brush clean by wiping it frequent on your paper towel. I did still find with this color that a lot of the shimmer still went into my monomer. So what I tend to do is just use a small amount of monomer at a time. So as you can see, I've only got a real small amount of monomer in my dappen dish. This way, if at any point your monomer is looking a little bit murky, you can throw it away without wasting loads of monomer. If I'd filled this jar up and it had got murky with that coloured acrylic and I have to throw it away, I'm going to be wasting loads. So I've kind of learned over the years that if I'm working with quite highly pigmented acrylics, to just have a small amount of monomer in my dish at a time. So we're going to go and do all of the copper penny on the tips of the nails, and then I like to let that dry. So technically by the time we get back to that little finger, that nail is going to be dry, so when we come and ombre our core colour over the top, we're not going to worry about that acrylic still being wet and kind of muddying it together. Now when I'm working with my coloured acrylic, I like to work with fairly small balls of acrylic because we're going to encapsulate in clear acrylic at the end anyway, so I don't tend to build up too much strength and structure with the coloured acrylic. Now as well here where we're doing our colour at the tip of the nail, this is going to be the thinnest point of the nail anyway, so I don't want to have to build up too much bulk with my colour, and then I'm going to come in and encapsulate and we're going to end up with a really thick bulky tip. Like I did mention, I'm working on top of these practice nail tips as though they are my clear acrylic base. So if you was doing this on yourself, you might have sculpted your clearer base, or you might have applied tips and then put a thin layer of clear acrylic over the top, but I do always like to have that clear layer down, and then especially when I'm working on myself, and then do any kind of nail or ombre on top of that clear base. And then you're going to come in and encapsulate, so you want to keep in all of those layers nice and thin. So with this particular coloured acrylic, I do find if you work with it thin, sometimes when you blend it back, you're only blending back the shimmer rather than the colour. So as you can see, a lot of the time I've worked with two beads, placed my first bead of acrylic down at the tip of the nail, pressed it out from side to side and then blended it back, but then come in with another small bead of acrylic just to blend that back so that we're still getting that pop of color, because I really want that rich brown shade to come through. I don't want it to look patchy or too light. And then as you can see, I'm doing lots of feathering with my brush to blend everything back, and I just love those beautiful shimmers. So I'm going to go in and do this one more time. So I'm picking up a small bead of acrylic, placing it down at the tip of the nail, cleaning off my brush, patting and pressing that acrylic out to the sides, and then we're going to flip the brush around and blend that back. Instantly lots of those shimmers blend back, but not as much of the color as I want to. Of course this is also going to depend on how you're wanting your ombre to look. So you might want to just leave it like this, so it's just darker at the tip of the nail, but I did want a little bit more of that color coming through. So I'm going to pick up a small bead of acrylic again, this time a little bit wetter, so that I can blend it both directions and get the coverage without adding too much thickness. And then just using lots of light feathery strokes to thin everything out, make sure it's all nice and blended. And you always want to make sure that whatever color you're using, you're blending it back into that nail bed area, so that there's no harsh line that's going to give you a blocky appearance when it comes to adding over your second color and creating your fade. So talking of our second color, we're going to be using Obsession from CJP. Now this is quite an opaque pink. It's kind of like a peachy pink. It's a really beautiful shade. It's one of my favorite core colors. So I picked up my bead here, and I'm just trying to show you guys here the color on the brush. Now again, because I was taking my time showing you, it did polymerize a little bit more than I would have wanted it to, especially where I'm working slightly drier as well. So I've placed that bead of acrylic down, and it's just not blending as well as I want it to. I should have probably picked this up a little bit wetter, but I'm just going to do my best to blend it down. And then I did have to faff about a little bit with this nail to perfect that ombre. The rest of the nails do go a little bit easier, but as you can see, I'm just blending that color down, and it's got a really nice warm tone to it. So I especially love this core color for autumn. It just makes me, I just feel as though it pairs up really nicely with those darker, more orange tones. So I'm blending this down. I did come in with a little bit of monomer just to try and fix up that bead, and then I'm going to pick up my next bead of acrylic. So I always burp my brush by flattening it on the bottom of my dapping dish. This is going to get any bubbles out, so then you're not going to be putting any bubbles into that bead of acrylic that you pick up. Then I'm picking up my cuticle bead, placing it down just away from the cuticle area, gently tapping it into place, and then I'm going to pull the sides down to begin with, leaving a lot of that product in the center of the nail because we're building up our apex as well with this color. A lot of the time, if I'm doing an ombre with a core color, I will create my apex using that core color, so that I haven't got to do too much encapsulation with my clear acrylic. Now this is completely optional, and it will depend on the color of the acrylic you're using. For example, Obsession is a core powder, so it's a strength powder. It doesn't need to be encapsulated. You can build up the entire nail with this. However, some colored acrylics, a lot of the brighter, more pigmented shades, they do need to be encapsulated. And again, this can differ depending on the brand that you're using, so that's something to just bear in mind. Although we are going to be encapsulating, I'm only going to be putting a thin encapsulation layer down, kind of to protect that blend we've created from filing. But if you was working with two colors that needed to be encapsulated, instead of building up any of your strength or structure with your peachy nudie color that you've got down at that nail bed area, you would keep that quite thin and then build up all of your strength and structure with your clear. Some people do just prefer to work this way as well, so they'll just apply their nude nice and thin and then fully encapsulate instead with that layer building up the apex. Now I did have to faff around with this now a little bit, but I just wanted to fix up that blend as much as possible. Ideally I would have actually been better off coming in with a small amount of copper penny and blending that back, but I just worked with it how it was. We're going to leave that to set and move on to the next now. So again, I go in my monomer, burp my brush, pick up a bead of acrylic. I always like to place my first bead down at that blend area, patting it out from side to side. As you can see, this bead, I'd picked it up a little bit wetter, so it blended over that coloured acrylic a lot easier. Blended it down towards the tip of the nail without covering up too much of our copper penny, and then I'm picking up a more medium sized bead, placing this down at the cuticle, patting it out to the sides using just a firm amount of pressure that we can push it up towards that cuticle, but I'm being quite cautious that I don't want to touch the cuticles. And then I'm just going to blend this down over the previous bead of acrylic, but as you can see, I'm not actually pulling my brush all the way down to the tip of the nail when I've got a lot of acrylic on it. I do that step now once I've cleaned off my brush. This way we're not going to cover up the tip of that nail with the Obsession. So again, always starting with a medium wetness bead. You don't want this first bead of acrylic to be too dry because it won't blend as well. Like if you look at the difference between the little finger and the ring finger, where I went in with that too dry bead on the little finger, it's just not blended as nicely as what it has done on the ring finger. So always go in with a nice sort of medium wet bead, blend that out, create your blend with that first small bead, then come in with your cuticle bead. This can be a little bit drier, it can be a bit bigger because you're not having to stress about creating the blend as much with this bead. You're just gonna get your nice neat cuticle area, start building up your apex area, covering that nail bed area, and then you're just blending this out over that blend that you've already created. And you can just use nice light feathery strokes to do this, and it makes it a lot easier. Now I really love an acrylic ombre. It's one of my absolute favorite things to do. I am a little out of practice, so it did feel a little bit of a challenge to do this set, especially where Copper Penny is quite dark and then the nude color is quite opaque. So I would recommend, if you're new to ombres, playing around and finding colors that are a little bit easier to work with. Usually I would say, like I said, shimmery colors for the tips of the nails, and maybe colors that are not so opaque for that apex and blend sort of nail bed area. Now once you have blended this out down towards the tip of the nail and you're happy, I always like to take a look at all of my ombres at this point because the acrylic does set fairly quickly. So at this point you can kind of see what your blend is going to look like. And at this point, if I look at any of the nails and I'm not happy with them, this is where I'll come in and fix up. So for example, here on the middle finger, I just wasn't 100% happy with this blend area. So I come in with a small, teeny tiny bead of Obsession and just fix that up, just using a small amount of acrylic. Here at this point is where I should have come in and fixed up the little finger, but I didn't want to get Copper Penny back out, so I just left it as it was. We're then going to come in and encapsulate. Now I'm using my Diamond Nail Supplies Clarity for encapsulation. This is my all-time favorite clear acrylic. As you can see, my pot is running very low. I do need to replace this one, but it is such a beautiful clear acrylic to work with. I like to work more on the medium to dry side, and I find that a lot of clear acrylics can be quite wet, and I don't really like that. So I do like that this one, I can still use it as a medium to dry ratio and it works really nicely. Now I'm only popping down a thin encapsulation layer because we have built up a lot of our strength and structure with that core color, but I do want to file and refine these, and I don't want to file into that blend that we've created with our colored acrylics. So I'm going to come in and fully encapsulate, but just with a thin layer. Now your encapsulation layer is going to differ depending on the nail you've done. For example, if you're working with glitters, you want to do your encapsulation layer a little bit wetter so that it gets all around those glitter pieces. And as well, if you're working on short nails, your encapsulation layer doesn't need to be as thick as what it would be if you're working on long nails. Again, medium nails, this is something you're going to have to kind of adjust depending on the nail. But when you are encapsulating, you want to make sure that you're building up a nice apex, you're creating that strength and structure in the back third of the nail so that if you were putting pressure on the nail, it's not going to snap or break. You don't want to have too much thickness down at the tip of the nail or around that cuticle line. So what I like to do is, it's a little hard to see on the Glamour Liz, or sorry, on the Red Iguana practice hand, but if you are, when I'm working on myself, I blend a lot more around that cuticle area, and then when I come to doing my finish filing, I make sure that that acrylic is quite flush with the cuticle rather than like a thick bulky ridge. So bear that in mind when you're applying your clear acrylic, and then again keeping it nice and thin up at that tip of the nail as well. Now if you do happen to apply your clear acrylic too thick, that's not something that you need to stress too much about because you can debulk when you come to doing your finish filing. Personally, I hate the filing stage of doing acrylic nails, so I try my hardest to apply my acrylic as neat as possible so that then I'm going to have less filing to do. do, I always remember, I can't actually remember who used to say it, but there used to be a YouTuber I used to watch, and she used to always say, apply your acrylic like you don't own a file. So meaning to apply that acrylic as neat as possible so that you don't have as much finished filing to do. And that used to always stick in my head when I was doing my encapsulation layout, to keep everything as neat as possible, because then you're going to have a minimal filing to do. I have been out of practice with acrylic though for the last couple of years, and I keep trying to get back into it, but then life just keeps getting in the way. Now off camera I did file all of these nails, so I did refine them all, debulk any areas like around that cuticle area. You can see now it's looking a lot more flush, and then I did, once I'd finished filing, go over them with a buffer to smooth out any scratches and cleaned away all of that dust. I don't usually show filing when I'm doing a set on the red iguana hand, just because when I'm filing on the red iguana hand, because the silicone is quite delicate, I like to take the tips out and then file them just so I don't mess up the silicone. But next time I do an acrylic set on myself, I'll try and leave some filing in the video. But once you have finished filing, it's really important to clean away all of the dust. So I like to give them a good brush with a hard scrubby brush with some alcohol on it, and then I'll just wipe over again with some alcohol as well. And then we're going to go in and top coat these using the Kiki London crystal top coat. This is one of my favorite top coats for a high shine finish, so I'm just going to apply a thin coat of this to all of the nails, and then this does require a 60-second cure, so I'm going to pop this in my LED lamp to cure for 60 seconds. And then that does bring us to the end of today's video. So it's quite a simple set, but I really hope you all enjoyed watching. I love an acrylic ombre and I love how cozy these look. If you did enjoy today's video, please do give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, let me know what color ombre I should do next. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, I'd absolutely love it if you hit that subscription button. Thank you all so much for watching. Lots of love. Take care. Bye bye.